When Captain Cook arrived, he found a robust and healthy people. We will look at Hawaii, a unique public health history. Public health, work worth doing. In Hawaii, a place worth staying. Our logo represents Ola. Being healthy depends on all. Healthy people, healthy communities, healthy islands. Our histories apart draw us together to this special place. The Hawaiians had their own systems, their own healers, their own public health. Cook described the native Hawaiians as robust and healthy. He estimated that the population was 250,000. By 1890, that was down to less than 41,000. If you remember that first picture with 5 canoes and over 100 people, by 1890 it was down to 1 canoe. In the first 50 years, diseases took their toll. Some may have come with Cook's sailors. Smoking had already become a problem by 1819. By 1853, the native Hawaiian population dropped by nearly half. In Connecticut, Henry Obukaya despaired that his people did not have the word of the Lord. He inspired the missionaries. Thomas Holman was the first medical missionary in the first company. Medicine and public health was little like what we know today. Well, maybe not in all aspects. In the background in 1837, you saw the old stone church, which in 1850 became formally known as Kauai Hau. In the foreground, you see Kina'u, the namesake of Kina'uhale. She was an ali'i wahine and the kuhina nui for King Kamehameha III, Kauikeaole. Here you see King Kamehameha III seated in the chair. Next to him is Kina'u. They're in a structure built to greet foreign dignitaries. It was situated between Fort and Bishop on Queen Street. The building no longer exists, but the name does. This is the Hale Kuila. The department traces its beginnings to 1850, when the King's Privy Council recommended a board for the port of Honolulu. In 1851, the Royal Legislature approved it. In 1853, they did it for the kingdom. Kauikeaole appointed 3 doctors to serve on the first board. Dr. Rook was Queen Emma's father. The impetus was smallpox. Here you see the first known written public health measure. Dated August 1st, 1836, issued by Na'ali'i Kina'u, Auhea, and Paki. It was to the pilot of Honolulu to determine whether smallpox or other pestilent diseases was on board any incoming vessel, and if so, the vessel was to hoist a yellow flag. Anybody neglecting the regulations would be severely punished, and the vessel would be driven from our shores. Smallpox was an ongoing concern. Despite efforts to vaccinate the population, we were not immune to worldwide epidemics. Houses became small hospitals. Despite that, whole families died because they feared going to any hospital. A quarantine island was donated by Prince Lot Kapua'iwa, and there were stories that the smallpox was being spread from San Francisco. We trace our beginnings to 1850 under King Kamehameha III. here pictured with his queen, Kalama. This was before Indiana established its department. Among the many contributions of Naali'i is Hawaii's first medical society and what we now know as the Queen's Medical Center. With the decline of the native Hawaiian population, there was a need for new industries and new workers. In 1850, an act was passed that created a system for the plantation economy. In 1870, a treaty with the U.S. created a market for the plantation economy. Over the next century, thousands of workers and their families came to Hawaii to work the plantations. Other groups came as well. The plantations needed their workers and their families to be healthy so that they could be in the fields. Sugar started to become big business by 1840. Pineapple began to become big business by 1900. Hansen's disease, or leprosy, was significant in our history. It was also called Mai Ho'oka'awale Ohana, the illness that separated families. Quarantine was seen as a preventative measure, and a colony was formed on Molokai, first at Kalawao, later at Kalapapa in 1866. Among the persons who served the residents at Kalapapa were Father Damien and Mother Marianne. Here we see persons with Hansen's disease, including Father Damien. And in this photo you see the Makanalua Peninsula where Kalaupapa is, and behind it you see the towering cliffs that serve as a natural barrier. Here we have Father Damien with some native Hawaiians, and on his funeral bier with Mother Marianne on the right. Plague, feared from ancient times, came to Hawaii. It was diagnosed in Chinatown, and the case was confirmed. Chinatown was quarantined, and the port of Honolulu was closed. Officials thought burning the houses of plague victims was a way to control it. That was a political and a public health blunder. The supposed squalor and congestion in Chinatown were seen to be the causes of the plague. The controlled burns that the public health officials thought would work got out of control, and the area from Kukui Street to the ocean and from River Street to Nuuanu burned to the ground. This photo, taken after the 1900 Chinatown fire, shows Kamakapili Church in the center back. Built in 1888 with two steeples because Kalakaua thought that one was not enough, the wooden steeples burned the church down from the inside out. Today, you are familiar with the Kamakapili Church at Palama and King Street. By 1900, hospitals were established on or near plantation. King Kamehameha V recognized the Kahuna. Then they were outlawed. Then they were licensed. And then they were not licensed. And then they were recognized again. In 1906, the first public health nurses were employed to treat tuberculosis. Also, TB sanatoriums were established throughout the territory. In 1919, Waimana Home was established. In 1920, the first multi-ethnic sugar strike began the process for better wages and better health benefits. Can you guess what this is? Do you see that cot hanging from the roof? This is the health department's ambulance. And this is the upgraded version. But do you still see that cot? Over the next 20 years, health centers were started, Maternal and infant health was focused on, the Public Health Nursing Bureau was established, the Oahu Insane Asylum was renamed the Territorial Hospital and moved to Kaneohe. Midwives were regulated, and diphtheria vaccine became one required for school entry. Continued improvements were made to plantation health. Epidemiological data began to be gathered more systematically. After midwives were regulated, Kauai had a nurse midwife education project. Mabel Wilcox was the PHN supervisor. In the 1940s, cell phones were developed to treat Hansen's disease. In the 1950s, Jonas Salk developed polio vaccine. In the 1960s, the Board of Health was reorganized into the Department of Health. In the 1970s, the Prepaid Healthcare Act was passed, a pioneering effort for more insurance for more people. In these 1950s era photos, you see a laboratories worker testing ice cream. You see a biplane spraying DDT over our vector control workers. And lastly, you see several workers in front of our then Department of Health building. The worker on the left holds a Geiger counter. The worker behind is in a department vehicle. The worker on the right has what we might today call a cell phone. They're all radiological health workers. They stand in front of the Kapuaiwa building, which used to be our headquarters. The building still stands at the corner of Queen and Punch Bowl. Prior to, but especially after 9/11 and the anthrax mail threat in 2001, public health emergency preparedness became a big issue. In the 1980s, the Department of Health's State Health Insurance Program brought the uninsured rate down to less than 3%. An Office of Hawaiian Health was created. In the 1990s, Hurricane Iniki devastated Kauai, as well as the west side of Oahu. Several suits were filed to improve mental health and developmental disabilities. In the 2000s, bioterrorism became a huge national issue. The Office of Language Access was created. In the 2010s, 21 became the age at which you could purchase tobacco, first in the nation. Medical marijuana became legal. 2020s? Who knows? When you come to Kinaohale, or if you've already been here and seen it, you will notice a large wall-sized mural. It's made completely of beach sand collected from 6 islands. By staff for George Van Moorhead, who then a public health educator who crafted this mural of the history of public health in Hawaii up to that time. What is your part in the public health of the future? Public health, everyone's kuleana. Why examine our Hawaii public health history? You all have a part in shaping our history. Hindsight allows us to reflect and learn from the past. Insight allows us to interpret and respond to the present. And foresight allows us to predict and prepare for the future. Things you do now can have far-reaching implications. Why this history? This presentation focuses on the population at contact and later, the impact of diseases, the role of the ali'i, and mileposts. Other retellings will differ. Emphases, events, persons, interpretations.